the buildings that we're building and managing are reflective of what we as humans need. So if our needs are changing, the buildings that we are going to need are going to change. So I think we have a huge opportunity in front of us, but also a huge challenge that we really need to be able to think about. How are we going to design buildings to sustain as we go forward? What is that going to look like?
Welcome to Connected FM, a podcast connecting you to the latest insights, tools, and resources to help you succeed in facility management. This podcast is brought to you by IFMA, the leading professional association for facility managers. If you are ready to grow your network and advance in your career, go to ifma.org to get started. Today, we're sharing the next installment of our Top Global FM Influencer series. Hosting this episode is Edward Wagner, one of our recognized influencers with more than 30 years in the real estate industry, including 2 decades as a technology executive. So we're going to hand it over to him as he introduces today's guest.
What's an IFMA global influencer? They're a credible voice in facilities management, sharing expertise, shaping trends, connecting disciplines, advocating for innovation, and simplifying complex topics in our industry. These individuals help expand the influence of facilities management, and in doing so, our entire profession. Today's guest is one of them. She is a frequent and top-rated speaker at major industry events, including Cornet and IFMA. She's testified as a subject matter expert before the U.S. House of Representatives and multiple U.S. congressional committees. Her impressive and extensive list of awards and recognition include Interior Design Magazine's Lifetime of Hipness Award, Designer of Distinction, the highest award of the American Society of Interior Designers, multiple awards recognizing her contributions to sustainability, diversity, and innovation, Cornet's Global Professional Excellence Award, and IFMA's own Distinguished Author Award for her research on neurodiversity. She is Director of Thought Leadership Interiors for HOK. Welcome, IFMA Global Influencer, Kay Sargent.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
It's so excited to be able to talk to you, and I've been a fan for many years. You actually have influenced me long before I got to meet you and do events with you or whatnot, and so no surprise to see your name on that list, but I know we're broadcasting to tens of thousands of people around the world, people that work in facilities management and around facilities management. And while all of those people are listening, as a global influencer, take the mic and influence us.
Snap out of it.
Wow.
Our industry is so stuck that we really need to get people to snap out of it. And I just find it so fascinating. We've been doing a lot of future casting with our clients. I've just come back with it from the Embassy of the Future. And if you think about our industry and the fact that we are building buildings that will stand for 70, 100, I was just in a building that stood for 1,000 years. And even the interior spaces that we're designing are going to stand for 10, 15, 20 years. Yet we're so focused on now and myopically focused on what's happening today. And by the time we even have these spaces built, probably already behind. And if there's any industry that really needs to be thinking about what's out there, what's on the horizon, and really designing for it, it's ours. But everybody is so focused right now on what's that great amenity that's going to, bring everybody back. And I think, we're also being set up for failure here because space alone cannot solve all of our problems. The way that we're working today, there's really a whole issue around work and how work is changing, how people and society is changing. And those two things should be driving the types of spaces that we're delivering. And I think specifically for facility managers, just buildings are starting to become more and more automated. And our roles are going to be shifting to really thinking about how am I managing and curating an amazing experience so that people will even want to be in the building? And so we have got to start embracing human-centric design. We have to start embracing really the big issues that are impacting us. And we need to start thinking about what is coming down the line and how that's going to impact our industry.
So I love that. I mean, we're so focused on the now. And I agree. Quite often we get in our boxes and we think about, what's around us. How would you tell people to get out of the box? What should they be looking at to change their thinking, to learn more about human-centric, to make sure that they're not designing for tomorrow, but for the real future? Because so often we get caught up in what we see and what our companies tell us and maybe what we see on LinkedIn. Where should people be looking for this thought leadership?
Yeah, we need to look outside of ours, by the way. If you're starting with what is the workplace of the future going to be, that's the wrong place to start. We need to think about what is work going to be like in 10, 15, 20 years? And what is the workforce going to look? And there are a lot of dynamics at play right now. We've got a generation that is going to live to be very old. That means they're probably going to be working longer. That means that retirement is going to be further off for them. And so in a lot of these circles that we're looking at, we're almost on the verge of retirement not even being a thing anymore. If you're going to live to 100, you're probably going to be working 50, 60, 70 years. And you can't wait until you retire. So we have to rethink this entire way that we're even functioning, because work itself and how we're doing it has become unsustainable. And if artificial intelligence is really going to truly improve productivity, then when do we start giving something back to people, right? When do we start focusing on human sustainability? And when do we start saying, okay, well, if we can get as much done in 4 days as we can 5, and we can have a little bit more, like take that retirement and bring it into chunks, have sabbaticals or have longer weekends, we need to start thinking about those types of things. And even just social dynamics are shifting. We have a huge percentage of the population now that may not have children. And that creates a very different nomadic workforce than the workforce that you might have had in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s. And their priorities are going to shift. The things that they're focused on are going to shift. Their ability is going to shift. I mean, my children are going to finish their careers in jobs that don't even exist today. They are going to have to go back and get retrained. So we need to fundamentally think about all of those other factors that are influencing work and the workforce. And then we need to think about, so what does that mean for the workplace? And how does that change the way we're designing and managing our buildings and our facilities and our cities and our lives?
So a couple of things that you said there that really struck me. First of all, I think most people would have stereotyped you as an architect. She's going to say in the office 5 days a week, 9 to 5. And I heard you talk about nomadic, creating workspaces for people at different stages of their life. I think about living longer, which we all hope to live longer.
I don't know. I may not. Like, look, they say that the first person to live to be 150 is alive on the planet today. Seriously? Wow. And, I have 5 kids, right? So death is my retirement plan. And there are days I can last enough for, I mean, seriously, I'm 6. My body won't make it to 90. I mean, I've got bad knees. I've got, whatever. Seriously. But that's one of the things, right? If you're going to live to be 100, you have to fundamentally rethink everything. You have to rethink, will I ever retire? Or will there be a different version of retirement? Before, if you're in certain jobs, you be a construction worker in your 70s and 80s, right? So we have to really fundamentally think about, what does this new reality that we could be living in, what does it mean? And what's our place?
And I think my takeaway from that too is you're not just talking about rethinking the workplace. We have to rethink everything about how we think about life if we're all going to live that much longer. So that's residential spaces, that is retail spaces, that's medical spaces. It's not just people think facility management and office. You're basically taking every building everywhere needs to be thought about differently, because the population will potentially live a lot longer than it ever has.
Right. And the buildings that we're building and managing are reflective of what we as humans need. So if our needs are changing, the buildings that we are going to need are going to change. So 70% of the building stock in the US and 90% of the global building stock is not designed appropriately to meet the sustainability goals that we need. So we need to fundamentally think about how are we going to either adapt those buildings, repurpose those buildings. We need to start thinking about circularity, et cetera. And so I think we have a huge opportunity in front of us, but also a huge challenge that we really need to be able to think about. How are we going to design buildings to sustain as we go forward? What is that going to look like?
Now, we've got a global audience. And so as you were talking about that, I was thinking, does what you say count for everyone? Or is, our sustainability goals more US, Western Europe, some of the more, say, evolved first world economies?
Right. So if you're looking at the Paris Climate Accord and or the UN standards, which are global, then yes, we are in that category. I think United States is relatively young compared to others, which presents a whole nother layer of challenges, right? If you think about like the return to office, European cities were designed very differently than US cities. I think people forget that most of the cities west of the Mississippi are less than 150 years old. They were primarily designed as central business districts with people living in the suburbs, where European cities evolved over centuries and had housing embedded throughout cores of the cities, right? So we have very different challenges, but almost any building built before 1990, and again, that's 90% of the buildings on the planet right now, do not meet those sustainability goals.
So what you said applies to everyone listening, no matter what country they're in. And I emphasize that because IFMA has chapters all over the world. We both have global backgrounds. We may have American accents, but we have some global experience. So I wanted to make sure that we drove that home. So there'll be listeners that will say, I agree with her, but I don't know where to go to educate myself on what I need to do differently. And obviously, IFMA's putting out a lot of material and has a lot of educational resources, but what are some other things that you would recommend that people follow and look at besides making sure they keep up with your work? What would you recommend they look at?
Well, if you want to follow two people on LinkedIn from our firm that you should follow, it's Christine Vandover and Sean Quinn. Sean is our director of regeneration. And I think it starts with a mind shift. Okay? I think it is time that we retire certain words like sustainability, because I don't know anybody that wants to just sustain, right? We all want to thrive. And I think we have actually kind of let that sustainability ship sail. We have now gone to a point where we have to reverse the damage that we've actually done. So sustaining isn't going to get us where we need to be. So we named Sean Quinn the director of sustainability probably 3 or 4 years ago. He did an amazing talk at South by Southwest. You can go online and Google. It talks about what we need to do to take this to the next level, and how do we actually create buildings that aren't just neutral, but are positive, that actually give back to society. And that's really, in a sense, what we need to do. So any and all buildings that are being built today, we need to think about that. And Christine and her team at HOK have done amazing work around circularity and responsible material resourcing and how do we repurpose things, et cetera. So lots of great work that's being done out there. We just need to do it on a much larger scale so that it has a bigger impact for all of us.
You said retire the word sustainability. So I want to make sure I'm not on a stage with you in the future and use that word. What word should we be using now? I heard thrive, but
yeah, regeneration.
Regeneration.
Yeah, and I am going to use the word sustainability because it still flips out of my mouth. But the notion is we got to go above and beyond that. We really do.
I like that. And truthfully, I had not thought about sustainability from that perspective. And I know quite often we'll hear words and our subconscious will interpret it the way we maybe learned the definition in school. Right. And I love the way you're emphasizing it's not about sustaining, it's about doing something different for a better result. So you mentioned 90% of the buildings built since 1990. There's probably a lot of
any building before 1990, which is 90% of the buildings on the planet.
So those 90% of the buildings, I know there's a lot of asset managers that make decisions based on the returns they think they can get or achieve. They've got those targets. So and a lot of facility managers and property managers would say, as always, I'm limited by what the owners will fund or invest. So what's the message to people that have the ownership stake that maybe don't see the return? Because let's face it, we're all dealing with quarterly returns and what Wall Street expects us to do on a quarterly basis. And a lot of what we're talking about takes a little longer to implement, and the impact has a little bit of a longer time frame. So how do we help asset managers make the case to make some of the investments that you and I both know that we need to do to create regeneration in our buildings?
I'm going to go back to what I started with, snap out of it. I mean, in 20, 30 years, when you're looking at your grandchildren, when you're looking at the next generation of designers, are they going to care about what happened here? I mean, we are the first generation that knows about climate change. We are the last generation that can probably do anything about it. And so we have a window where we have to act. And if we don't act, it doesn't matter. Those corporate profits down the line, and I know everybody's so myopically focused on that. We're so focused on the now and what's going to happen. We've got to get outside of our own heads, and we've got to connect ourselves to something bigger. We have a huge impact on this planet. 40% of the carbon emissions on this planet are coming from the built environment. We have a major impact, and people spend 90% of their time indoors. We have a major impact on people, and we have to think about what that is, not only today, but going forward, and what that means for the next generation. We are going to basically set the legacy for the next 2 or 3 or 4 generations, if not forever. And we have to determine what are our priorities and what's important. Every single one of us needs to get outside of our own little box and stop looking down at our feet. We need to start looking out at the horizon and thinking about what is coming and what kind of world we want to pass on to the next generation and the next generation and the next.
As you were talking, I was thinking about a call you and I had not too long ago. And I had asked AI to create the office of the future and use that as my backdrop. And you had a very visceral reaction because it was based on what we already know about. It was basically the current office, maybe with a couple of new gadgets, but it wasn't really a reinvented future office like we talked about. So thinking that a lot of people are starting to lean into AI and look for their answers based on our conversation and your reaction to what you saw in my background, they're going to get the wrong answers from AI. So how do we get people to think out of the box and not be trapped in what they've always done, maybe what the business unit leaders are thinking they need?
Yeah.
How do we change the industry's perception of it's not just another amenity, it's completely rethinking the way we work?
Well, let me give you an example of what this is. Somebody was telling me recently that, they have this great tool that can look at how everybody is using it, and AI can run all this analysis and they can collect all this data and it can tell you exactly how people are using it so that you can design the space of the future. Well, you basically just told me how to design the space that already exists, right? Because you're replicating what is already happening. And you're not even asking, is what people are doing now what I want them to do? And I want everybody just to stop and think how much time you spend multitasking on Zoom calls, responding to emails, and doing menial tasks that really are not that important. Is that really what we want to replicate? And this whole conversation about productivity, I think, is a false flag. I think what we need to start thinking about is, what do you do that drives value? Why do you even have an office where people can come together? And is it so they can just sit there and do individual tasks all day and, respond on emails all day? Because quite frankly, you could pretty much do that anywhere. We need to think about all the bad behavior that we're doing right now and rethink that. And there are a lot of people that do heads down concentrative work. There are a lot of people that are doing production work, working in an architectural firm. We got a lot of people that are doing drawings off. But we also have to think about, I want people to come together because I want them to learn from each other. I want them to learn from osmosis. I want them to engage together. I want them to continue their learning. We are in an apprenticeship model. I will tell you, you don't want a building that's been designed by an architect that graduated from college and worked in his basement for the next 30 years, right? You don't know everything you need to know when you graduate. And there are a lot of professions that are like, so are you setting up the space for the behavior you want? Not the behavior you do, the behavior you want. And I will tell you, there's a lot of offices right now that are encouraging bad behavior or things that really aren't driving value. And so we need to rethink what that actually means to us, what we value, and design spaces intentionally that support that and enable people to function at a higher level.
As you were talking, it reminded me, I recently was privileged to attend a very small roundtable of very senior real estate executives. If I were to name them, everybody would know the companies and the people. So I'm not going to do that. But they were talking about this very topic about we're incenting wrong behaviors.
Yeah.
And they started talking about people that with the return to office mandates, there are people that are coming to the office, badge swiping, getting coffee, and then leaving. Came to the office to prove that they were there,
Yeah.
but they're not being productive. And I think that's an example of where even our senior real estate people know that what their companies are making us do is not the right thing to incent that productivity or that right behavior. And I think it just supports what you said about completely rethinking the why of the office and the how of the office. And you and I both have been in real estate for decades. I think we love the industry. We're not saying do away with the office or do away with our downtown central business districts or our office parks or anything. We're just saying do it better.
Yeah, I think we're losing community. And I think offices can really provide a lot of community and connections and relationships. And I'm gonna say, this is gonna be very unpopular, so I'm gonna apologize. I'm gonna be an equal opportunity in advance. I think there are a lot of people that are waking up in the morning and thinking like, do I want to put on pants and drive to the office? No. They're not thinking, what do my clients need from me? What do my colleagues need from me? What do I need? And they're making decisions based on their personal preferences, not necessarily what's actually right. If you ask me, and we ask dumb questions, we ask what everybody wants. And it's not that I don't care what you want, but that's not the only thing we need to consider here. If you asked me what I want for dinner, I want chocolate for dinner. But I don't eat chocolate for dinner because I know the consequences of that. But I want chocolate for dinner. Okay? We asked a whole lot of people that didn't necessarily know the consequences of the decisions that they were about to make, what they wanted. And I think a lot of people are making decisions that are easy or more comfortable or they want. I also think that work has become unsustainable. This whole notion of commuting 5 days a week to a place and you're sitting in traffic just endlessly, like nonstop, and so much of your day is burnt up in that stuff, there's got to be a better solution, right? And so I think we have to find a way that we can meet in the middle. Maybe you're not coming to the office, 5 days a week. Maybe it's 4 days a week. Maybe it's 3 days a week. Maybe you're only working 3 or 4 days a week, right? If you're going to be working longer, if we can leverage artificial intelligence, we have to look at the tools at hand and figure out what we can do to support people having a sustainable lifestyle, but one that also is beneficial for their colleagues and their clients and the business. Because if the business isn't successful, we're not going to have jobs. So we have to worry about all of those different things. So I think right now, most people are thinking very self-centric. They're just thinking about what do I personally want. And we have got to create organizations and places that connect people to something bigger than themselves that they want to be part of. And that means changing the way we've always done.
Running a business is no small job. You've got a million things to manage and people to please. Whether it's healthcare, hospitality, or professional cleaning, ODP Business Solutions is your trusted source for breakroom and cleaning supplies. From cleaning products to healthier snacks, they have what you need to clean smarter, stock faster, and support your team with trusted products, reliable service, and fast delivery. Visit odpbusiness.com to learn more.
I'm thinking back to an early mentor who, when I was starting to get into sales a little bit, said, wants and needs. You can always sell to what you think a client wants, but the true person that's delivering value will figure out what they need and help them understand that. Even if it's a journey to get there, help the client understand what they need. And I think that I was reminded of that as you were talking.
Yeah. And I think we just get in such a rut. Again, snap out of it, right? I don't think anybody values you spending 8 hours a day on email, but that's what a lot of people are doing. And I think we all need to really think about what is our biggest value and then how much time are we spending that? If my value is to win work, I'm spending half an hour a day doing that, maybe I need to reallocate, right? Or if my value is educating or mentoring the next generation, and I'm kind of there, but not really doing that, and the space doesn't really support it, right? We need to really focus in and then double down on creating and shaping our days and our spaces to support what it is that we actually value.
It's interesting you say that. I'm reminded the first 10 years of my career, there was no email. And I worked for some very large companies. I know. And they survived. It's like, how did we survive? And it's like,
every time I travel, like, how did I get through cities and how did I maneuver without a phone? But we did for a long time.
We did. And my partner would tell you, I can't get through Chicago without mine now. I'm just lost without those directions. And it's funny how we forget what we knew before and how we survived before and have kind of become subservient to technology.
I went to Asia and my oldest daughter was with me. And after a 17-hour flight from San Francisco to Singapore, we're running to get to our next flight. We had like an hour. We were probably like 10 feet away from the gate. And I looked at my daughter. I said, I left my phone on the plane. And she's like, I'm like, we have to go back and get it. And I'm like, you're with me. I have my laptop, whatever. We're supposed to be on vacation anyway. Like, whatever, forget it. She just she could not comprehend that. She could not wrap her head around the fact that I was willing to go without my phone for weeks. And I'm like, good riddance.
I took a vacation without a device because I was taking a sabbatical. And you would have thought I was going through a drug withdrawal. I kept thinking, I've got to go back and check email. Yeah. And my partner was like, why? You're not working right now. We're on a sabbatical. There's nothing to check. But I still have that itch. And, there's a lot of studies that say it's very akin to, withdrawals or addiction or whatnot. And I think we get so addicted to our tech, just like we get addicted to the way we design the spaces that we design. We get caught into that loop.
Well, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, even before the pandemic, we started to change the way that we design spaces because I got so sick of just seeing rows and rows of benching. And look, the reason we have benching is because London ran out of space 30 years ago, right? Tell somebody in Texas that they have to sit in a bench because somebody in London ran out of space, right? And they've got all the space in the world. And they don't have underfloor systems like they do in Europe. So we really started to challenge this. And it just kind of became the default, right? Like, of the largest rectangular table you could shove into every conference room with the maximum number of chairs and rows of benching. And it's like, what? And so literally, if you want to see me go flying monkey, show me a test fit that looks like that. And we have totally changed all of our processes to really get to better results. There is a science behind what we do as designers, and I don't think we've leaned into that enough. And a lot of the thought leadership we're doing right now around whether it's future casting, whether it's designing for neurodiversity and sensory processing and cognitive well-being, whether it's regeneration, whether it's evidence-based design and coming up with those solutions, is really to come to and to help us create spaces that are more fit for purpose, that are more authentic to who our clients really are, and are more reflective of what they actually need and will help people function at a higher level. And I'm going to go back to the AI thing. If I'm just following trends, go ahead and do regenerative AI to create your spaces all you want, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to pull trends from the past. If you want to look forward and you want to think about what's coming and you want to be more reflective of who you are and have a deeper understanding, then you have to have a designer that really truly understands that. And I can take the same ingredients and give it to a master chef and a 5-year-old, and I guarantee you're not going to get the same dish. Right. So right now, generative AI is giving me 5-year-old med, right? Where I think designers who are really tapping into the science of design and evidence-based solutions are kind of creating that master chef solution. And eventually, artificial intelligence will catch up with that to some degree, but we really understand who we're designing for, humans, because we are.
Loved your example. A good master chef, a good master designer will figure out the space you need and end up wanting. Just like
Yeah.
a good chef could figure out how to work chocolate into your
Oh,
dinner entree.
that's what I really want for dinner.
So there are people that are listening to us right now that are, they don't have the decades of experience that we do, but they do see a need for change. How would you advise someone that wants to have an influence on their organization? They want them to think differently. How can they influence their leadership to think differently, to take their needs into account, to listen to this younger generation?
Yeah. Be curious. Be curious about the experiences and the expertise of the older generation. Be curious about the things that are yet to come, and ask better questions. Why? Why do we have, this huge rectangular table in a room for gathering? And why aren't we thinking about this? And I think curiosity has really fueled my career. I think every now and then a client will ask a question that will put me off on a tangent that just totally changes everything and takes us down a different path. Those got to be really good questions, by the way, but they are. And I think it's important to think about what if. What if we have people that are living to 100? What does that mean? And what does that look like? What if we can't have cars in cities anymore because of climate change? What if we start having more autonomous vehicles, right? So start playing out those scenarios and start thinking about what is likely to happen and what does that actually mean and what is the ramifications. This is where I get really nervous because I have 5 kids. My oldest daughter was probably in 3rd grade when they went to standardized testing, and they stopped teaching kids to ask what if, and they started drilling them with facts so they could pass standardized tests. But I can ask any question to Google or Chat GPT and get an answer. It's the what if and what does that mean, that ability to ponder and to put things together in a brand new way that people haven't necessarily thought of. That's where the real power and the interesting stuff happens, right? I mean, what if you have a whole generation that doesn't have a lot of kids? What does it mean to the workforce? And what does it mean to your retirement plan and your ability to groom the next generation? What if we only did work 4 days a week? What could that be, right? Could we have a whole new renaissance because people actually now have time to invest in the arts and music and all of these wonderful things? What if some of this stuff with artificial intelligence goes awry? What if? And I think that's really, the power we need to think about. And we do a lot of future casting sessions. And I will say that I love it when the executives, because it's usually the C-suite that we're doing this with, brings in kind of their up-and-coming leadership teams. And we often find that the existing C-suite is so focused on the share price and what's happening right now in the return, right? Because that's what they're being judged on. But it's that tier down generation that is thinking about, what about the longevity imperative? And what about artificial intelligence? And what about sustainability? Or, all of these things that could happen. And so I think we have to hit this on multiple levels. And I think we have to tap in to the energy and the excitement and the ability to think outside of the box of some of these younger folks, pull it all together to create better scenarios about what we could be dealing with and thinking about what's possible.
What if we all snapped out of it and thought differently? I love that. IFMA has a group of rapid fire questions they've given me to ask. So you've been named a global influencer and we're going to go to dinner. You get to pick the place. What's your favorite food or what type of cuisine are we going to eat? You get to pick what I'm going to eat for dinner. I already know chocolate's going to be involved somewhere.
Oh, the only time my children have ever had an intervention with me, because I tend to be a cereal eater, not breakfast cereal, but like I go back to the same place. So because I travel so much and I never can control what I eat or where I eat when I am home, El Paso, Tex-Mex, taco, get like totally down for it.
We're going to Tex-Mex next time we're together.
We're doing it.
Being a global influencer means you are constantly learning. What's something you're learning right now, professionally or personally?
Neuroaesthetics. We've
Ooh,
done a ton of research around neurodiversity and continuing to learn that. We're doing more research on minorities and typically historically marginalized populations and the impact of neuroaesthetics as well, just on us and how we function and how we feel, like happiness, beauty, and joy, and what that means for us.
this is not a rapid fire question, but that research will actually influence and change how you think about workplaces because as we become more aware of neurodiverse populations and
Right.
inclusion and leveraging their abilities, which quite frankly, a lot of them have abilities I don't have, especially when you
Oh, yeah.
start thinking about data, that's going to influence workplace design pretty radically, is it not?
Yeah. So we have 8 years of research on this, just published a book on neurodiversity and inclusion, and it has absolutely fundamentally reshaped how we design everything. Airports, sporting arenas, workplaces, healthcare, hospitality, everything. There is not a single practice within our firm that has not been impacted by this and is not thinking differently about how we design spaces. And it's not just for people that are neurodivergent. I don't know a single person that isn't impacted by light, sound, temperature, noise, all of those things. We're being overwhelmed by those things. And we need to be able to create spaces that have a positive impact on people, not a negative.
I love that. I mean, we're all different, unique people, and
Absolutely. Everyone is neurodiverse. We're just not all neurodivergent.
I love that. Next question. It's
Okay.
probably never been as challenging in our industry as it is right now. What motivates you to come to work every day?
My curiosity. And I'm gonna say, like, we always tend to think, oh, this is the most challenging period. Look, I remember one time there was a group of young millennials, like 10 years ago, we were talking about, how tech savvy they were. We went from drafting, no internet, and no computers to CAD and BIM, right? That was a pretty radical shift. And so I think we've had challenges before in our industry, maybe just to a different degree. I think the challenge now is that everybody thinks they're an expert in workplace and everything is being questioned.
So we talked a lot about future of workplace. What about the future of corporate real estate and facilities management?
I think our industry is ripe for change. I think we are stuck in a rut. I think we are not delivering things fast enough. We are not being responsive enough. We are not really truly addressing the issues of the day. And we have been saying for 6 years, so maybe we missed it a little bit, but we're saying this could be our Kodak moment where we fundamentally know that everything about what we do is shifting and changes and needs to change, but we don't know how to, or we're so invested in the existing system that we can't. And I think we really have to reinvent ourselves before it is done to us. Changes
I
that,
love that. Yeah, as you were speaking, and you didn't ask me this question, but I'll give you my perspective on the
yes,
future of the
please.
industry.
What's your
I
perspective?
think for so long, facility managers have been like the back office of the back office. Nobody's ever reached out to a facility manager that I know of and said, I had a great day in the office. Everything was perfect. I loved the air conditioning because I do love my air conditioning. I was able to find my desk. It's always a complaint. It's always about,
It's a thankless
doing
job.
things, cut cost.
Yeah.
If you think about the impact facility managers have, they manage the workplaces that our people, which is one of the biggest costs in corporations, have the compensation cost. They manage the real estate, which is another huge bucket of cost. And now we're bringing so much technology into the buildings, another big bucket of cost. There is so much influence facility
Yeah.
managers could have where they need to be in the front office, helping the people in the front office understand the opportunities in our workplaces that impact three of the biggest buckets of cost. The only reason corporations have space is to produce their goods or services that their customers are buying. So ultimately, it's about you and me and everybody else that's buying whatever from whatever company. Facility managers impact every person, client, employee associated with that company. And I think there's a
Yeah.
huge opportunity.
I had this conversation at lunch with someone who runs a very large government facility. And, I think we take for granted how smoothly things run until they don't. Some of those core fundamental things that just help us get by every single day. And we've just taken that for granted.
I think that's an excellent reminder that if you're looking for technology people or real estate people, there are a lot of people in the public sector that are probably looking for new opportunities and may not know how to reach into the private sector. So a great opportunity for those of us that are looking for more talent.
These guys have kept buildings that haven't been renovated in 40 and 50 years running. That's an art.
Yes. Love that. All right. Last question. If you were to write a book, and I know you have written books, but if you were to write another book,
Yes.
what would it be about?
I didn't want to write this one, but I was goaded into it. The book that I really want to write is They Haven't Killed Me Yet, and stories about all the stuff that I've been through with my 5 kids. And the fact that I'm still standing here and they haven't killed me yet, even though no matter how hard they've tried in many cases. My oldest son set the house on fire once. And in the way to the ambulance, I'm like, my God, what else can happen in my life? Like, just how much crazier can it be? And he said, oh, you're going to look back on this one day and laugh. And I said, if I have a brain cell left to even remember it. And he said, well, just start writing it down. And so that night I started, and within a few months I had 200 pages of stories that my kids had put me through. And then I put my pen down for 10 years. And I haven't picked it back up. I have a whole list of new things that I need to write. But the other night, my kids were challenging me on a story that I was telling about their childhood. And I said, well, let's go see what I wrote in real time. And so I pulled the book out. They had no idea it existed. And now they're all like, what is this book? And what are these stories? Like, what is this? Right? But Mom was right. Like, Mom's memory was better than the 5-year-old's memory about what happened at that point. So yeah, that's the book I'd write.
I love it. And that actually works for career too.
Right.
I think you need to write that book. I know I would certainly read it. And, those stories that show real people, the personalities are some of the best ones.
Well, I will tell you, in the book that we did write about neurodiversity, I do tell stories about my family. And several people have said that's the part that they really resonated with them the most. But I will say that when we were preparing it, our chief legal counsel was one that had read the book. And she called me one day before it came out. She goes, Kate, have your sons read this? I said, well, they read the parts about them. They haven't read the rest. And she's like, are they okay with it? And I said, yeah, I mean, they read it. And they're like, and they've signed the waivers? I'm like, okay, now you're freaking me out. Like, it's just really personal. And so I thought about it, and I called my youngest son, who's the only one that would care. The other two were like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. And I called him and I said, you know that I'm putting this in the book and you're okay with that, right? And he goes, yeah, I mean, who's going to read it? And I'm like, well, I hope somebody reads it. He goes, yeah, but none of my friends are ever going to read it, so what do I care? And I'm just like, all right, okay, there you go.
What's the name of the book?
Designing Neuro-Inclusive Workplaces.
And is it available on Amazon?
Absolutely.
This has been absolutely delightful. It is always so wonderful to be around you, to be challenged, but also the way that you deliver it is such a wonderful, refreshing way. And I really appreciate you taking your time to help people understand what it takes to be a global influencer and how they can be an influencer in our industry. Congratulations again, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Connected FM podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the show because it really helps us reach more listeners just like you. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. See you next time.